Good afternoon, my name is Camden and welcome back to my channel. I realized something the other day, which is that when I created my channel banner on my channel, I tried to include some of what you might expect to find on my channel, and I put reading challenges, vlogs, and recommendations. And although I've definitely put out quite a few of the first two options, I've never actually made a dedicated book recommendations video. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. Actually, not quite, because what I'm actually doing is putting out an audiobook recommendations video. Every book that I'm including in this video is a book that I genuinely recommend and is also a book that I genuinely feel like is a better listening experience than a reading experience for one reason or another. I'll explain all of my reasons as we go, so let's just hop right into the recommendations. The first few books are in a category that I titled You Read It Better Than I Ever Could. The first book in this category is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This book is so good. It follows a young teen girl named Xiomara who is going through a phase where she's discovering a lot about herself as well as trying to navigate her Harlem neighborhood, and she's doing this all through the lens of slam poetry. The entire book is written in verse and the audiobook is read by the author herself. She definitely does justice to this book that I could never possibly do reading aloud, reading in my head. She knows all the right intonations and the feelings that she wanted to imbue into the words, so I really feel that this one is definitely worth the listen if you guys can get your hands on the audiobook. The next book is in the exact same vein. This one is Clap When You Land, also by Elizabeth Acevedo. This one follows two young girls who share a father but do not know that the other exists. One lives in New York City and one lives in the Dominican Republic, and they only learn of each other's existence when their father tragically passes away in a plane crash flying between the two countries. This one is really heartbreaking. It is also written in verse and it is also narrated by the author, and for the exact same reason, I really think it's worth listening to instead of reading if you can. The next category is audiobooks that have multiple narrators. I really love either full cast audiobooks or ones that have multiple narrators, just because every character has their own unique voice, and I really like to hear those voices and be able to distinguish between the characters and all of that. So I really enjoy books that include a narrator for every perspective that we follow throughout the book. The first book in this category is The One by John Mars. This is an excellent kind of Black Mirror-esque sci-fi novel. It follows a woman who has founded a new type of dating app where you can actually enter your DNA and be matched up genetically with your soulmate. Obviously, everyone is kind of hopping on this technological bandwagon. Throughout the book, we are following a variety of perspectives of people who are trying out this new dating site, are meeting up with their soulmates, are getting to know their soulmates, and cracks begin to appear in this new technology. It does have a little bit of a mystery thriller aspect to it, as well as one of the perspectives we are following is one of a serial killer. I really felt that the multiple narrations in this one added a lot of dimension to this story, and that's why I recommend listening to this one if you can get your hands on the audiobook. The next book in this category is Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica. This is the latest Mary Kubica novel, I believe, and it's the only one of hers that I've read, but just like everybody else who picked up this book, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I just read it at the beginning of this year, and it is probably up there on my top 10 thrillers of all time. It was so good, very twisty, and it has several different characters that we follow throughout the story, each with their own unique voice, which again, I really think adds to the experience. This book is about a woman who went missing many years ago along with her very young daughter, and only the daughter returned. We meet her in captivity with her kidnappers, and we watch as she escapes, as she is reunited with her family, and we watch as the pieces begin to unfold and the timelines begin to collide as the missing girl has a lot of missing pieces of her memory, and we're watching as her mother is coming up to the event of herself and her daughter getting kidnapped. There's a lot of different moving parts in this book. There's a lot of different twists and turns, and it's really excellent. I definitely recommend, and I recommend the audiobook even more. Sorry, I feel like I'm losing my voice a little bit in this video, so disregard. The next book on this list for multiple narrators is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It feels like everyone and their mother has read this book and really highly recommends it, and I am no different. I'm a basic bitch. This book is very, very well told and very compulsively readable or listenable, whichever way you choose to go with it. It follows an old Hollywood actress, kind of in the vein of like a Marilyn Monroe as far as fame and notoriety goes. Throughout her life and her career, she never really reaches out to do an interview or covers anything personal in her interviews, so it's very, very surprising when she reaches out to Monica to write her memoir. The book is told in kind of an interview process. A lot of it is monologues of Evelyn discussing her life, obviously her love life, and the 7 husbands that she had throughout her life. It's a very, very interesting look into a very real feeling character who has a lot of moral grayness to her at times, has a lot of toxicity to her at other times, but is overall a caring, loving person. I think it was a very moving story to see someone be very realistically drawn in this way, despite being like a Hollywood starlet. And the last book in this category is a book that I just read not too long ago, and that is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. I read the first half of this book in a video, and then I ended up finishing the last few hours on audiobook, and I have to say I really enjoyed the audiobook experience more. There are a few different perspectives that we are following in this book. We're following a girl named Jess who is trying to locate her missing brother, and then we are following several different characters who live within the apartment building that he was living in before his disappearance. This book is set in Paris, France, and there are some French phrases throughout the book, which I took a few years of French in high school, but I'm not like totally brushed up on my pronunciation. Sometimes the audiobook experience is nice because you get to hear the language spoken by people who clearly did their research and aren't just like going off the cuff like you or I. That aspect of it lended well to an audiobook as well. This book though was really, really excellent. Not every thriller will like push the envelope as far as this one did with like where the twists actually led you. Definitely one of my favorites of the year so far. Give it a go if you can, and if you can get the audiobook, I highly recommend. The next category is one I've titled multimedia, which basically just means there's other elements at play throughout the audiobook. The first recommendation I have for this is Sadie by Courtney Stevens. This one has a podcast element to it, so there's some production involved in the storytelling in this audiobook, where we have some music, we have some footsteps, we have some like theatrical sound effects and like podcasty elements that the producers of this audiobook chose to include to kind of set the tone. So we are following a girl whose sister has gone missing and she is trying to find her, and there's also a podcaster who has decided to pick up the case as the new season of their podcast. So they're producing a podcast about the disappearance of the sister. I am a big fan of true crime, so I really, really appreciated this story, and I really appreciated the lengths they went to make the podcast aspect of the story come to life in this audiobook. So I definitely recommend that you go the audiobook route if you decide to pick up this book. The next book follows in the exact same vein. This one is The Night Swim by Meagan Goldin. This book is similar in that it has a podcast element to it that's very highly produced. Basically, this book centers around a podcaster who has chosen this small town and a very high-profile trial that is happening in this town to be the subject of her latest season of her podcast. The trial at the center of this case really reminds me of the Brock Turner case that happened several years ago, if you guys followed that at all when it was happening. We are following a very talented up-and-coming swimmer who everyone thinks is destined to be an Olympian. He ends up sexually assaulting a young girl in high school who is actually the daughter of the police chief. At the same time as all this, there is a woman in the town who is trying to convince the podcaster to take a closer look into the death of her sisters. This book was very well done. I really enjoyed the trial aspect to it. I don't get to see that part of like a thriller a lot, but I really thought it was well done. It shed a lot of light onto the strategies that defense teams will use against young girls who are victims. I thought that was really educational, especially for people who don't really follow true crime and aren't aware of these techniques that they use to try and intimidate and undermine testimony. And the last book in this category is Book of 1,000 Days by Shannon Hale. You guys know this one is one of my favorite books of all time. If you watch my videos, you will have seen it before, I'm sure. But I really do recommend this one as an audiobook. This one has a full cast audio. It's very well done. Every single character is voiced by a different person. It kind of has a theatrical vibe in that way, where it's like almost like a play, but you're just listening to it. There's also sound effects, background music throughout the book. It's really, really well done. There's also a really interesting, like, fantastical cultural aspect to this book where the main character sings healing songs and we get to actually hear the characters singing. I've listened to the audiobook so many times, and even now when I read the book to myself, I hear them like singing in my head. So like I have the full audiobook like playing in my head at this point because I've listened to it so many times. The story itself follows a princess and her handmaid who are locked in a tower for 7 years as a punishment for the princess being unwilling to marry the man that her father chose for her. And it follows their adventures in this tower and then their adventure when they end up breaking out of the tower. I try to get everybody I know to read it because I love it so much. So if you have the time, please check out the audiobook or read it. Honestly, just consume this book in any way that you can. Okay, we are finally on to the last category, which is very, very vague and general. One reason or another, I just enjoyed it. And surprisingly, this category is fairly small. There's only 3 books in it. And I think it's just either the narrator just did such a good job or the audiobook was such a good experience for me that I just really, really recommend it. The first one is Hunted by Meagan Spooner. I really, really love this book. Something about the way the author read it, I just really enjoyed. It's a book that is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it's very, very different from any other like retelling I've ever seen. It really is like an actual beast that she is hunting and trying to kill because she believes that it killed her father. I feel like this book is very underrated and I don't know a lot of people who have read it. And the audiobook I found to be very enjoyable to listen to on like a cozy, snowy day. I know those are like pretty much behind us now that it's April, but maybe save this recommendation for next winter and try it then. The next book on the list is The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. Again, there's not a lot I can say except for general vibe to recommend this one to you as an audiobook more so than the book. I really enjoyed the narrator. I really enjoyed this book in general. I think it has some fond memories attached for me, which is part of the reason that I enjoyed the audiobook more. The plot of this book is a little bit difficult to explain. Basically, the setting of this one is like a Regency era fantasy setting. So there's balls, there's the courting season, there's gentleman callers, there's dancing cards, there's all that good stuff. But we obviously have like a fantasy twist to it. The magic system is the part that's difficult to explain. So basically, to practice magic, you have to invite spirits into your body, and they come with their own type of magic that you can then utilize and practice. Basically, you form a relationship with this spirit, and men are very encouraged to practice magic. There are schools to like go and like learn how to use the spirit, how to bond with it, how to use their magic to your own benefit. However, for women, it's a much different scenario. We're obviously in kind of a patriarchal society in this book, and there is a great deal of fear that when a woman gets pregnant, if she has a spirit inside her, the spirit could possess the child who doesn't have enough sentience at the time to be able to like fight off the spirit. So as soon as women are married, their magic is kind of shackled and tied to their husband's magic, so they are unable to practice magic. Our main character is fighting against this society and this system tooth and nail, and she is very determined to become a magician herself and to practice magic. She wants to focus on her powers instead of chaining herself to a man. So we are following her as she's trying to fight against these societal norms while also falling in love with one of the suitors who is courting her, and kind of having this battle in her mind over which course of action she wants to take. That was kind of a difficult plot to explain. I know, I'm sorry. I wanted to give you kind of a detailed explanation, so I did my best, but if that was unclear, my bad. The last book that I have on my list is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This book is a dark academia mystery thriller novel. The setting is a art school where there are several different concentrations that the students can choose from, whether that's philosophy, theater, music, writing, etc. We are following 6 students who have chosen a theater concentration, and they are putting together a production of Shakespeare. There is an alternative perspective to this story, and that is set many years in the future, as one of the characters is explaining how he went to prison for the last few years for the death of one of the students and what the real story behind his death was. This book was very good. I really enjoy dark academia in general, and this is definitely my favorite book that I've read from the subgenre so far. It's been compared to books like The Secret History by Donna Tartt and also We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, if you enjoyed either of those books. And the reason that I feel it is best suited to audiobook as opposed to reading is that there is a lot of Shakespeare sprinkled throughout, and as we all know, Shakespeare can be a little dense and difficult to read at times. So hearing it like performed by somebody who has obviously practiced and knows what they're doing and says the lines very fluently and dramatically was really, really enjoyable. Definitely recommend. So yeah, those are the books that I recommend you pick up on audiobook if you have access and if you get the chance. I think you will thoroughly enjoy any of them. But anyway, those are all the books that I have for you in this video. Thank you guys so much. Let me know if there's any other type of recommendations videos you'd like to see from me. And I really look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Have a great one. Bye.